That's Dash.
And that's done.
And we're rolling bones.
Today, we're going to look at Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what it is, what you need to get started to play, how far you can get into it, how you can really customize this to what you want if this is something you want to get into.
We are going to start with the very basics. Even though Dungeons and Dragons is something that almost everyone is familiar with and knows the name, there are those out there who don't actually know what a pen and paper role-playing game is.
Yep.
And there are some other pen and paper role-playing games that we play as well that we'll get into on this channel, but Dungeons and Dragons being the grandfather of them all,
yes,
we felt should be the first one to be touched on.
Yeah.
Should be the first one covered. Just so some of you will look at this and be like, yeah, everybody knows this stuff. But there are those that I hope can gain some stuff from this.
Right. So one of the approaches that we take with this channel is, what if you're somebody that has absolutely no experience with these games? We want to try to ease you into that as much as we can without getting too technical. That is something we've even run into with some of our videos, is we use terminology that a lot of people are going, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So those of you that are familiar with this stuff and know like what we're talking about, be patient, be nice. But
Yep.
We hope that people can enjoy it, and feel free, those of you that know stuff and like have stuff, feel free to comment.
All right, let's get started. So, when somebody asks me what I do on any particular Friday night, and that night happens to be a D&D night, by the way, D&D short for Dungeons and Dragons, I'll say to them, oh, it's D&D, and about half the time I get a shrug and I don't know what that is. So, at its core, Dungeons and Dragons is a story that you are telling with a group of friends. You have a game master who runs the rules. They run most of the world. Mm-hmm. And then each player has a character that they are taking a role in this story. And it's not unlike what you used to do as a kid. Maybe you did cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians, whatever you did.
One of the terms that you'll hear associated with pen and paper role-playing games is the term Dungeon Master, Game Master, Storyteller.
Yeah. Most games use the term Game Master. Some have their own specific term they want to use because it adds to the flavor for the game. Storyteller's common for White Wolf games. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Game Master, like I said, is generic. Most games use that. Dungeon Master was first coined for Dungeons and Dragons.
And you'll hear that referred to as the DM, the GM, Storyteller. I just know Storyteller, but that's because I don't play enough games to use that. There are role-playing games that are video games. Dungeons and Dragons and these other ones that we'll talk most about on this channel are in the class of pen and paper role-playing games, so pen and paper RPG.
Unlike a lot of games, this really is a cooperative thing. Even with the DM or GM and the players, it's not necessarily adversarial like a board game typically tends to be.
Yeah, one thing that like I touch on when I have people that are just starting out as wanting to run their first game as the DM or the GM or anything like that is to remind them that it's not them against the players. Many times the players feel that they are against the GM or the DM because they're fighting their creatures, their stuff. But one thing to remember as the person running the game, you can kill the characters at any time. That's not the point. You can win. Winning as the DM or the GM is your players having a fun time, not beating them, because you can do that. Now the players, part of the fun, some of the stuff is beating the storytellers, the
challenge.
Is beating them in certain things. And you can have players fighting players and being against each other that way in certain settings as well. And again, you have to look at things even in that situation as you are being cooperative to tell the story, not just trying to beat each other.
Yeah. In this handbook here, it talks about the 3 pillars of role-playing. those three pillars, I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't remember exactly how they wrote it, is exploration, role-playing, and combat. And experiencing these three things together encompass what Dungeons & Dragons is all about, and I would even argue most pen and paper role-playing games. You want to be able to go out and explore this world. You want to experience it. You want to interact with the characters. And I've found most of the people I play with, that's where they have probably, I wouldn't say most of the fun, but a good amount of the fun is right there in that interaction with the characters. And if you have a good GM that knows how to play different personality types, and he does great, actually.
No,
He's laughing because I know what he's thinking. He does great. But you've got this GM that can really portray a colorful world that you can interact with. So many players love that. They have a lot of fun with it. And me personally, I like that, but it would feel incomplete for me without the combat part. I like to roll dice and shoot a gun or swing a sword and just make a mess of the world. This is not something I ever want to do in real life, but I can do it in this world.
But that's the thing. It's a role-playing game. I don't do this to be real life.
Right. This is.
I live my real life. I know what that's like. I do this to be someone else, do something else.
It's an escape. Yes.
So there's a line in Role Models where, I mean, it's a little sad when he talks about it in the movie, but he's like, I like doing this because I don't have to be me. I like being me, but I like to be someone else too.
Yeah.
To take on this role of someone that's not like me. A lot of the times, there's two major, are the two types of characters I play most, because they're not like me, is either the big tough guy who can just beat everybody up, and that's fun, a little bit. But more often, it's the social character who can, like, do everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, can talk their way out of stuff, it's a lot of fun, because I'm not that way either. And that's the thing, is I like playing someone that I'm not like.
All right, so you've determined, instead of watching television or playing a video game, you want to get into a pen and paper role-playing game. Me personally, I like a lot of them. The reason I like D&D and would often push D&D for most new players is the current edition is pretty simple compared to a lot of other games I've played. So yes, let's talk about what you need.
Finding a place where you can play with relatively few interruptions is a good thing.
That's a great place to start, actually. You need a place to play, and I would recommend a big table and a table that you can write on. You're going to need something to write with, a standard character sheet. One of the other things you're going to need,
the player's handbook.
With Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to be looking for 5th edition, and the cover that I keep showing is, I'll show it again, and I'm sure it'll be back here. It looks like this more or less. There are some variations, but 5e is what you're going to want to look for. And the reason I recommend 5e is because they've made a lot of effort to do digital support for this edition. If you want to be current with any third-party stuff, when you make your character, you're going to choose, number one, your race. So let's just assume you're going to play the bare bones Dungeons & Dragons. We won't go into all the variations you can do. So you're going to open your book and you're going to see, oh, I can be an elf or a halfling or a human or a half-orc, dwarf, whatever. You're going to pick your race, then you're going to pick a class. Very similar to what a lot of video games do. These classes all have different abilities.
Wizard, rogue.
Yeah, standard
warrior.
Fantasy, yeah. Fantasy kind of tropes. So you're going to pick that. Your class determines your abilities. You're going to want to be, if you're a player, you're going to want to be familiar with that. At least read through your class. It takes a few minutes. Every time you level up, read a little bit further. You don't even need to read the whole thing. Just be familiar with what you can do at your level, which at level 1 isn't a lot.
The next thing that you have to have for the game
is a set of dice. The 6 most essential dice.
A D20. When you say D, it's the dice and then the number of sides.
The number of sides that it has. So D20, and then you've got a D12, a D10, then you have the D8, D6, and a D4. I won't go through making a character step by step because that's a whole video by itself.
Yeah.
But essentially you're going to fill in all the important fields on this sheet. You're going to put your weapons and the stats there, and you're going to know how to use your character. You're going to have your spells written down. So you have everything you need to play the game with just this book. But let's say you don't want to make up your own monsters. Well, they've got a solution for that. Here's a book of probably, I think, a couple hundred monsters. It's got art. I mean, it's a beautiful book. It has all the stats that you need, and it explains them all. So you don't need to make up your own monsters. You can get this book. So third party. You don't even need to buy Wizards of the Coast brand stuff, which this is Wizards of the Coast. This is from a company called Kobold Press, and it's also a monster manual of sorts. Has its own artwork and stats, and so there are tomes of information out there for you to be able to use if you so choose. But this is what I would consider a staple. Not absolutely needed, but helpful, very helpful. Next in the series of books that you should get if you really want to flesh out your game is this one. So the Dungeon Master's Handbook or Guide. This one gives you magic items. It teaches you more in-depth steps on creating NPCs or non-player characters. And it gives you all sorts of tips and hints on building dungeons. So you can really complete your game with these 3 books.
So if you're first just going to play Dungeons and Dragons, your DM should be able to provide most of this stuff to you as just a player. If you're going to play with an established group, you should have access to this from them. If you are starting a group together from scratch with people, you will want at minimum the player's handbook and the dice.
I know a lot of these rules are available for free. They have a database, kind of a wiki for these rules, the basic rules. They're all published for free. Yeah. And so you don't absolutely have to have it. It's just helpful. The website is nice because you can just do a Google search and it's going to be the first thing that comes up. I've had players use it. Yeah. So it's helpful that way. Also digitally, you'll save money. If you're interested, and you want to buy something, you actually don't need to buy the book. You can just download the app. There's D&D Beyond, and it has all of the books that they've published in digital format, plus some that they haven't done in hard copy. So there are all of the books. Here's the Player's Handbook here that we're talking about. You can see where I'm at in my reading. And so I read at night, and this way I don't have to have my lamp on bothering my wife.
Yeah.
So I'll read from the handbook digitally. So you can do that too. You've got a lot of options. You're not stuck with any one thing.
There's plenty of dice rollers out there, digital dice rollers.
Yes.
So if you can do everything digitally, it also makes it there are ways to play online.
Yep.
There are systems that help with that, or you can just do your own thing, just with a Zoom call and things like that. And
I've played over Zoom.
But there are, and if you're interested in looking into it, you can find these out. But there are actual services out there that you can play online that help with the integrating things together.
Yeah, the 2 biggest ones are Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah,
they're both really good systems. I've never used Fantasy Grounds. I have used Roll20 for Pathfinder, and by the way, Roll20 specifically, I don't know about Fantasy Grounds, supports tons of different games, so you're not stuck with just D&D.
And so again, that has its uses, it has its purposes. Personally, for me, because when I do play pen and paper RPGs, one of the biggest elements of it that I enjoy is it's a social game.
It is.
It's a social thing. Harder for me to get that social effect from playing online, but sometimes that's the option you have.
Yeah, so I had a group. They lived about an hour away from me, and our best bet to play was to play online. And so we did for several years. So other things, though, that help your game, they have published many books with new options for your characters. This is one of the latest. It says here on the bottom, a magical mixture of new rules options for the world's greatest role-playing game. And so it's different, I think, races you can play, little twists on your class that you can take. So I haven't actually read it, so I'm not sure exactly what's in here. Here's another one. Let's say your DM doesn't want to make up his own story. Well, there's a solution for that. They've published their own.
And there are a lot of
modules as pre-constructed adventure.
Yeah. Even in a world that you've made yourself, that you've set up and done your own world building and things like that, which is a lot of fun and can be good. I actually look at some of the modules and some of the things, and I will take things from them.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of inspiration. There's a guy named Matthew Colville. He does really, really well done videos about Dungeons and Dragons. That's all he does. Well, no, it's not.
It's not all he does, but that's
what I watch. That's what I watch him for.
And it translates into everything very well.
It does.
All other games very well.
It does, but this man has mastered the art of taking from old published adventures. This is a new one, so he'll take from something done in the 80s and incorporate it into his 5th edition game, and he has a great time with it.
That is our intro to Dungeons and Dragons. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Many of you will look at this and say, yeah, what's that about?
Still don't know what it is.
Or some of you will look at it and say, I knew that. Like, why? Who doesn't know this stuff?
Hopefully, if you don't know what it is, it gives you an idea of why you would want to play a game like this, and if you're looking for something that gives you some adventure, something to do with your family or friends, there is this option, and it's a good one, I think. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks. See you next time.